Oh, yeah, we do have a lot to talk about on today's show.
No, we do.
Yeah, J.D. Vance, Waltz, vice president debate. Actually, a debate,
It really was.
in some aspects, and finally got to sit and think. I was sitting there thinking, this is what politics should look like. This is what, a debate should look like.
Civilized conversation between two individuals who are competing at the end of the day for the same position, but civilized. You can let each other speak. You can obviously have different viewpoints with each other, obviously, because you're on different sides. But at least as a audience, as an American citizen who have these two candidates in front of me, it was a nice change to be able to sit down with my wife, watch it, and say, you know what? That was pleasant.
And planned.
And planned.
Come on now. Come on now. That was coached 100% all the way through. I mean, neither one of them taking really any major stab at each other. I mean,
Right.
yeah, a little bit of conflict arising as it should, but and disagreements, right? Each person representing their own, party and running mate's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was very nice though to sit there and watch and to try to at least get a good understanding of what each individual's thoughts were on the various topics. Thought there was some interesting spice thrown in there by the moderators.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of bias.
Yeah, this is this
Not near as much as the presidential debate, though.
Right, right. But when the mics come out, turn off, and then all of a sudden, I thought there would be no fact checking, but then,
Yeah, come on.
yeah,
Now, it adds for a fun watch, right?
right.
So on our show, what we're going to do is break down literally, we're going to jump in there with the political world that we're in, the election coming up, you and me representing a company asset management group focused on individuals' financial well-being, where they are today, where they're trying to go, and using our podcast show, YouTube channel, social media platform, Beyond Tomorrow, to really force, engage, and challenge people to think about, okay, how should I vote? What should I think about as I vote and prepare to vote? And what does my vote mean to my pocket, to my family, to my finance, to my faith? Okay. And this is not, there's nothing easy about the topic. And, I think both you and I would probably come to the agreement that maybe even you and I disagree in some areas.
Right.
So I can only imagine that a lot of friends, families, clients, just people that are, attend our podcast and watch our show, they may disagree as well. And that's okay. Our goal is just to have a good quality conversation and challenge your thought process on how to approach this upcoming election.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about it.
All right. So look, man, J.D. Vance, how old is J.D. Vance?
I want to say he's 40.
Okay, so he's our age.
Yeah.
All right. So J.D. Vance, young guy, probably a little shaky at the knees, right? First,
it's a big stage to be on.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, and they hit him right out of the gate with this Israel-Iran foreign policy, global challenges that we're facing, and basically
and it was that exact day. Literally, it was
right,
the day
correct.
when the missiles launched.
Correct. And they're like, okay, so what would you do? Opening statements. Who are you? Glad you're here. How do you handle this situation? I'm like, oh man, that's tough. Right out of the gate.
Right out the gate.
All right. So what's your thoughts?
He basically talked and highlighted Trump's viewpoint, right? Peace through strength, and essentially where Trump has made it very clear that Israel is an ally. And if you attack Israel, an attack on Israel is basically almost like an attack on the U.S.
Yeah.
And so you have to show that you are willing to use military force if needed. Hence, peace through strength, right? So as long as your enemies believe that if they cross the line for whatever reason there is, then military action can be and will be used. And so I think JD really just continued to stress that point that, if Trump becomes president, military force can be used and will be used if necessary.
Yeah.
And he highlighted multiple times throughout the debate of, when Trump was in office, it was a very peaceful world that we were in. And for the last 3.5 years since the Biden administration has been in office, we've seen some conflicts.
Yeah.
And it continues to. And JD's point was, peace through strength actually worked for 4 years.
I wanna read a quote from Trump, and and I quote, Trump said, "If Iran wants to fight, that will be the official end of Iran. Never threaten the United States again." And to me, you're right. That kind of resembles JD Vance's perspective in response to the question.
Right.
We are going to lead through strength. We are the strongest nation, and we have the ability to stand by our allies and stand firm and stand strong in what we believe is right, and we'll put, our money, our strength, our power to it, military to it. And so I felt like you're right. That kind of carried his tone. Waltz was, to me, a classic Biden Harris, perspective, in that we're going to lead through steady, we're going to control the situation through steady leadership. And steady leadership is in maybe more of a lenient push toward diplomacy, relationship, and not try to basically shake the waters up any.
Right.
I'll also say a quote from Harris: "We are committed to ensuring Iran never acquires nuclear weapons, and we will reengage in diplomatic efforts." And that's kind of the approach there, is to focus more on diplomacy and foreign policy to be able to control, in some aspects, the situation at hand. I was thinking through that response too, and leadership's tough.
It is tough.
And I don't act to even really truly understand exactly what these individuals face in either party at their level, with the information that they have at hand, and trying to make some of these challenging decisions. Because there's a lot that goes, I'm sure, that goes into the decision, number one, but there's a lot that they know out of respect for them that we don't know.
Right.
We're just not privy to. But I couldn't imagine actually being able to manage relations, as tough as relationships in general are, with the terrorist group, with Hamas, with Hezbollah, with Iraq, Iran. I don't know how you even go about thinking that diplomacy might work in a situation like that, over just reflecting the strength that we have. These are our boundaries, just don't cross them.
Right.
So
There's a lot at stake, It's a global issue, right? I mean, these relationships are have been in works for decades.
yeah,
Decades, right? Before JD Vance was even born, before Harris was even born, right? So you don't want to rattle the feathers too much, right? Because there's lives at stake.
yeah,
Not just American lives, but lives everywhere, right? That are at stake. So you're right. I mean, the decision to either act or not act is a big one. But at the end of the day, with the U.S. being a global power, and for lack of better words, the basically the global big brother, right? We have to show, I believe, we have to show strength, and we can't show weakness.
yeah.
And especially as something as dangerous as destructive as nuclear, right? I mean, that term continues to be brought up. Weapons of mass destruction, nuclear wars. I mean, nuclear missiles and arms. I feel like there needs to be some level of strength being shown.
I was gonna pull up real quick, if I can find it. Something I was reading. Let me see here. Earlier this morning, just it kind of to your beginning remarks, Mo, about what challenges we have faced globally in this administration in comparison to Trump, and there's no real bias here from my thoughts. I think for my fear for having the leadership of our country headed by Harris, that's probably one of my biggest concerns. Is global strength, more so honestly than economic policy, and we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about in the upcoming weeks about tax law and which party supporting which tax laws will influence, and affect our pockets here.
Yeah.
But when you look back, definitely the Trump administration was heavily challenged. And I wish I could find it. I can't find it. Of course, I'm trying to pull it up on the moment, but heavily challenged in several different scenarios. Here it is. Okay, so global conflicts during Trump's administration. You have the Syrian airstrike of Syria, Syrian war, North Korea nuclear crisis. You can remember some of those headlines that honestly, tensions de-escalated, but they're kind of back again. U.S. conflict with Iran, the Afghanistan war, okay, dealing with Taliban. So Trump's administration, while he was serving as president, definitely faced a lot of global conflict.
Right.
I would have to say, from my perspective, in my best attempt to be unbiased, I feel the presentation of strength seemed to have brought at least a season. Okay, whether that was just temporary and it was never going to be like that long term, we don't know. But at least during that season, it brought. I don't know if peace is the right word, but it didn't bring a whole lot of extra conflict. Things were de-escalated.
Right.
Okay. Leading through diplomacy and focusing on steady and stable relationships globally, based off of my observation, doesn't seem like it's worked too well. Just because a lot of the conflicts that existed during Trump's administration carried on through the Biden administration, and obviously a lot of the things that were de-escalated now came to fruition.
Right.
And obviously we're talking about Russia-Ukraine war, Iran nuclear tension, which is continuing ongoing, and now we're dealing with other things. So anyway, it's a big question to hit right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And I think like you said, being the day of, gosh, that's a tough. The world's watching. Right?
The world is watching. The world is watching, yeah, and I think the world's watching too to see how, both candidates would react to it. Because if you're looking for steady leadership, leadership looks different, can look different ways, right? We run a company and leadership looks completely different than, personality wise, right? So Trump has the demeanor of someone that may not seem very, quote unquote, rational. Right.
Right.
With some of the tweets and statements that he makes. And sometimes Kamala just laughs a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. But I think the stage was, the audience was looking to see, I think at least on Vance's part, we know who Trump is. As his running mate, do you have the same type of demeanor as he does? Or is there maybe a calming voice that's going to be in the office? I think Vance really
I think was his intent.
Yeah.
He had to be something opposite that Trump was not in the first debate.
Right.
And so he did it well. And also, Waltz, I feel like, did it well too. He was able to get across some of that genuine, West, not West Coast, Midwest, type of demeanor, and I felt like it got across. Matter of fact, I told you, I said, we were sitting there literally in the bed watching it, and my oldest son, who's he's old enough, almost 16 years old, able to think, and we watched both debates. And watching the first debate, it was almost an annoyance for both individuals.
Yeah.
Sitting there thinking, what are you actually getting out of this? Literally nothing. You might as well shut it off. And then watching the one the other night, you were able to sit there and think, okay, well, let me think through this myself. And listening to their statements and the way that they presented their thoughts allowed you to have the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to go there and think through, okay, what's he saying? What makes sense? What's he saying? What makes sense? So
yeah.
I respect it. On to a very, well-known political conversation, which is a real concern, but it's a real conversation that needs to be had. Climate change and the impact of policy regarding climate change on the economy. I posted something on X not too long ago. And, climate change, for sure, Trump's kind of represents this not really interested in going there type of thing. Like, it's not that big of a deal, and so I feel like Trump's naturally kind of taken the approach of just not worried about it. Which, personally for me, with what little I know about the topic, I kind of feel like there's bigger issues that we need to be concerned about, not knowing the full impact of what, climate change actually represents, the concerns and the crisis that it might bring to the table. I feel like there's more things that are imminent and present today.
Yeah.
But that was an interesting topic to hear both of them, and I feel like it was a classic Republican Democratic approach. I don't know if there was anything super great there.
Yeah. I will echo your points of my lack of knowledge when it comes to climate change, right? About the greenhouse gases and effects, and its global warming, and is the Earth temperatures rising in relation to the last 20 years? Like I don't know any of that, right? Listening to that debate, I still think it was a little bit of a dig, right? I mean, we were just coming after the aftermath of Hurricane Helena. And the moderator said, because of massive rainfall, could have for the years of rainfall, or the abundance of rainfall, could have led to why these hurricanes are becoming more disastrous, and hence the whole climate change issue. And I thought that Vance, kind of made it a good point of challenging Biden and Harris administration about, their respect for climate change. He brought it back to, well, if you believe in climate change, then you should believe in releasing more of energy restrictions here. And instead of building and manufacturing products overseas and bringing dirty products back to the States, where the U.S. has more clean energy versus countries that have dirty energy.
I thought that was a brilliant response.
I thought it was a brilliant response as well. And, Walz kind of echoed Biden's administration with more cleaner energy. And bringing jobs to help with this initiative of green energy. So addressing climate change with jobs versus addressing climate change with bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. was an interesting way to view climate change, in my opinion.
I feel like that's exactly what Tim Walz, his response was more focused on the economic opportunity by focusing on clean energy. Basically, with the amount of money that's been spent, billions and billions of dollars by the Biden-Harris administration, the focus there was not the results in regards to clean energy as much as it was, I feel like he was focusing on the job creation.
Right.
Okay. And to your point, it's like, okay, we're throwing so much money at the government level at this topic and this concern. And when you dig deeper, to JD Vance's point and your point, a lot of that money is going to develop and create manufacturing overseas, literally overseas, whether it's, batteries, chips, whatever. And then in an economy that is one of the worst, in regards to pollution on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's like you think about clean energy, it's like, okay, well, when the atmosphere, and I don't know too much about it either, but I'm thinking like, okay, well, yeah, we don't live like in their pocket, so we're probably physically not as affected, but globally, surely,
right.
As things, fumes or whatever go in the air, it's all a big issue. You're not avoiding it by sending it over there.
Right. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago we were in San Diego?
Right.
And I was blown by it. The image of the border between Mexico and the U.S.
Incredible.
And what's been built up into the up into the border of Mexico, the manufacturing, and you looked at this kind of the sky and what it looked like climate-wise right at the border of Mexico and the end of California. Complete difference, stark difference of of what the skies look like, and it was pretty interesting. Right?
Oh, it was way different. Yeah. It was like you literally dropped a curtain between the two. It was nuts. But like, to my point though, like okay, so maybe their inability to financially support clean energy in their country has created this, nasty environment for the citizens there. And we look at that and say, okay, well, that's not impacting us. You look at the picture, it's like, okay, well, clearly we're not breathing what they're breathing. We can see it, the difference. But when we're talking about rainfall and we're talking about storms and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, well, that's a global issue.
Right.
Okay. The hurricane that comes out and up through the Gulf, like that's not just because of, Mexico's not doing their job. So when you invest billions and billions of dollars at the government level into this infrastructure to try to create clean energy, but then to do that, you create manufacturing in areas that are not focused on clean energy because you need cheap labor, you need cheap product, and then you're going to ship it back in. What are you doing?
Right.
Like you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, it kind of like goes against exactly what your thoughts are about, making the world a greener or a safer place climate-wise. So
Let's go. I'm
interesting.
gonna wrap the energy up with two quotes since we hit it with the other one.
Yeah.
Trump says we will continue to have the cleanest air, the cleanest water, but we're not going to lose millions of jobs. I'm not willing to sacrifice wealth for dreams and windmills. Interesting statement. I want to pause here just real quick. If you haven't been out through the Midwest and you've seen the windmills, okay, you've drove through I-70, through I-40, or up through the northern parts of this country, going across the Midwest. When you look out and you see the vast pastures and meadows covered with these huge, monstrous windmills, okay, and you see the amount of them that are either A, not rotating, creating energy, or B, they are, and then you go and read or you talk to some of those locals on the amount of energy that's actually created from those. I mean, it's ruined the landscape, 100% ruined from a visual standpoint.
From a visual standpoint,
yeah, from the aesthetics of it. Like you look out and it's like, man, it looks awful. It looks like we live in an industrial site. And the lack of energy creation by those. So I think, to Trump's response here in this quote that I just read, the frustration is not that I disagree, or I don't even think he disagrees that clean energy is not an end goal.
Right.
We want to be an economy that leads in that world. But when you find something that ain't working, you got to stop doing it.
Right.
And you got to shift gears and try something different. On to Harris. Climate change is an existential threat. Joe and I will rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement and lead the world in fighting climate change while creating millions of jobs, of good-paying jobs. And also, to Harris's point here, it is an existential threat. Climate change is a concern. But
she brought back jobs again.
Yeah, she's focused. It's a job creation thing. Yeah, right. There's other ways to create jobs.
But it's going to be interesting, Again, I think we both have said again that we're not climate experts, but it'd be interesting because if Harris, and I haven't read too much about this, but if Harris is piggybacking Biden's viewpoint on, at least for cars being more EV, right, being more electric, in the next few years, what's that going to do to the climate? Right, I mean the amount of energy it takes, right, to build electric cars and to run electric cars, right? What is that going to do to the environment?
Well, first and foremost, yeah, if we can't create solar panels well enough to truly run a grid, to operate a house, then what makes us think that we're going to create the energy enough to supply the batteries and the equipment necessary to run manufacturing plants to build the EV cars?
Yeah.
I don't, we're just not there yet.
We're just not there yet. Yeah.
We're not there yet. And we're not going to be there tomorrow. It doesn't mean we shouldn't push forward and try to be innovative, but we're just not there yet.
Yeah.
Okay. So on to a big heavy hitter right here, immigration and border control. One of the things that you and I both have said is that in a few of the topics we've discussed is we're not experts. Okay. Right. I will be the first to say that one of the frustrations I think you have as a U.S. citizen and a voter is that we lack clarity, not information. We lack clarity to be an expert,
right? Because
we're not given clear responses from the candidates running for president. And that, to me, I feel like that's been the case my entire adult life. I feel like, when you're sitting there watching two individuals that represent different beliefs, that represent different motives, that represent a different mission, and they can't clearly articulate exactly what they're running for and what they're going to push, it frustrates the average person like me that's just trying to get a better understanding on who to vote for and why I would vote for that individual. Immigration, though, and border control, I feel like it's been a little bit more clear to grasp. But it's a hot topic.
It is a hot topic.
On a personal level, okay, me and you both are a part of the same family.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a Hispanic nephew, soon to marry a Hispanic niece, whose family's fully Hispanic. Nephew that's African American. You're African American. We have a very diverse family.
We do.
Okay. So I feel like it's a topic that we can speak to in some sense. So I'm just going to throw it out to you. What's your thoughts when the whole conversation of immigration pops up? What are you thinking here?
That's a good question. So I come from a family of immigrants. So my sister and I, first generation American. So my mother and my father, uncles and aunts are Haitian, right? So they came here late 50s, early 60s. Father came first, father and my uncle came first, and then built the foundation in New York, and then slowly brought everyone else over. So my sister and I, again, first generation, born in the U.S., born in Brooklyn. So I understand why people come to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
I think anyone who understands the opportunity that the United States presents and offers when you are from another country, especially a third world country, you see the opportunity the U.S. presents, and you want to be here. I get it, completely get it. But at the end of the day, there are legal ways to go about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my family did it the legal way of coming here. And when you see millions and millions and millions of immigrants coming in, obviously not every single one of them are bad, right? Because again, I just talked about the opportunity to prosper here. But as a country, we have to have borders. We have to have tough borders. And coming into the States, America was built on the back of immigrants. And so I think as a nation, we understand the need for immigrants here, right? But doing it in a very legal way, and it's, on the same token, as an American citizen, I look at some of the opportunities that are given to illegal immigrants, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Housing. I grew up in Brooklyn, where parts of it still now is underfunded.
Mm-hmm.
But you have immigrants that are coming in and get housing.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense, right? We've talked about, later on we're going to talk about the housing crisis and affordability here in the United States over the last few years. But then in California, they pass laws where they're giving immigrants like housing, or at least a break in housing or funding for housing, and it's like, well, what happened to our citizens that are paying taxes? Like, how does that equate? Where all of a sudden we find funding, but not funding for our American citizens,
Right.
So it's I feel conflicted in areas.
Yeah, because you put yourself in, and like you said, you've had a family experience. Your lineage made that transition. For me, I'm like, there's nothing exciting. We're 1700s deep wooded Hamlin, West Virginia, but nonetheless, the truth is I mean, come on, we're all at least humble enough to know that we didn't choose to be born here. We're fortunate to be born here.
Right.
It was at least from our perspective, we were given an opportunity at birth to be born here. And that's contributed to a higher being for whatever reason. This is where we are. And we could have very well been the individual on the other side of the border. And so when I think through that lens, to me, I get it. If I'm an individual that was born and raised in Mexico or born and raised in a third world country, what am I doing? I'm going to fight for whatever I can possibly do to put my children and generations behind me, behind me, in a better situation. Totally respect it.
Yeah.
With that said, being a citizen and being born and raised here, as opportunistic as that is in and of itself, I do think that, in agreement with you, we have to have laws. And I don't think Harris and Biden refrained from the idea of having laws in place. And I don't think, the Trump administration, when it was in office, obviously the way in which they enforced those laws were different. I think, once again, it goes back to the leadership I believe that Harris will naturally present, which is diplomacy and kind of this smooth, steady, I'm not going to be all over the place, be very consistent in who I am as a person and how I react as a person. And so therefore, people will naturally just, do what I say because this is the way it should be done. The problem with that is the focus on enforcing laws. It should be enforcing laws, not just about the humanity surrounding how and the reasons why you would enforce a law. The law's there. When you raise a child, and I'm not saying we've done it perfect, we haven't, but when you raise a child, there's a rule. And if you violate that rule, there can be grace, and there should be grace, but there comes a point where the rule has to be enforced.
Right.
Yeah, you can't do this or you lose this, right? You can't now, if you cross the border, we're not going to not give you anything to eat, but we're going to feed you on your way back. The rule still has to be enforced.
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like both VP running mates, both kind of presented their thoughts, I think, relative to their running mates respectively in representation of their parties. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think both parties are just trying to solve the issue in a different manner.
Yeah.
Right.
But they both recognize that it's an issue.
They both recognize it's an issue. But, going back to their steady leadership again, right? I'll bring some of these quotes from Trump, right? Yeah. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some I assume are good people. And some I assume are good people, right?
Which both parties do that.
Yeah.
They maximize the worst part of it's like these horrific. They bring up the horrific deaths that happen from an illegal immigrant, right? Just like on the flip side, just like when we're talking about abortion, the one thing that always comes up with the topic of abortion is the worst scenario.
Worst case scenario, yeah.
A young girl raped, impregnated, and what do? And so it's like, okay, some immigrants for sure are criminals, just like some Americans are criminals.
Right.
But I feel like that's always the emphasis,
Yeah. You have the negative bias, right? I mean, you have to have the negative bias. You don't have to, but the negative bias, in some aspects, reinforces your standpoint.
Yeah.
Right. And Harris has a quote that says, "We are a nation that welcomes immigrants, but we also must enforce our laws in a humane way." So very similar to what you said.
Yeah.
You cross the border, we're going to give you something to eat, right? Humane, but we've got to enforce the laws.
Yeah.
Right. And
the lack of enforcement is been the issue.
Right.
Over the past several years. Tough one to talk through with people. Different people have different perspectives because they come from a different background, a different history. But nonetheless, I think that's good conversation.
I think that's going to be one of the highlighted areas when people are voting this in about a month.
Yeah.
I think immigration is going to be one of the biggest points of where they cast their votes.
Well, and I think too, and I know we're gonna have to pull the plug on the show coming up since we went long, but
yeah,
there's so many different topics to cover. But one thing that we as voters have got to remember is, number one, we're voting not for personality, we're voting for policy, right? And we're trying to vote for the individual that's going to represent and support policies and change that we think are best suited for our country, but most in line with our morality. At least for my stance, that's how I would think through it. When you're voting on something like the topic that we're discussing, immigration, you have to also remember that it's not about your love for the immigrant as much as it is also you have to consider the impact economically and the long-term impact to generations, your children and generations ahead. Because if we leave borders open, there is a direct effect to the economy as a result of that. Government spending, government has to make more money, increase taxation, got to have increased tax to support the back end of revenue that's supporting the increase in the outflow. You got to manage inflation. Well, you got more people demanding more resources, cost is going up. Inflation, you got dilution of wages because maybe people are willing to work for a lower price. So there's also
housing.
There's housing.
You've got to house these individuals, right?
Yeah, they got to live somewhere.
They got to live somewhere. Yeah.
You know, we're already short on housing. You see high housing prices through the roof, which there's a lot of different opinions about that. There's a lot going on. So when you think about voting in the rights of immigrants, you can't just think about your passion to care for the person, although that is very, very important and maybe should even be the forefront. You also got to think through, though, how do we do that legally that's going to work in society, economically, and in all other areas too.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some areas, gun control. Right? That was another conversation, another topic point, and I think some people are worried that the Second Amendment will be repealed, right? And it's we're here in the South, and moving here in Georgia since 2008, so almost 16 years. My viewpoint on guns has changed since when I was in the North, and so I think that's one thing that people are worried about. If one administration becomes president, are you going to repeal the Second Amendment? Are you going to infringe on my right to bear arms? But going back to the humanity side of it, right? I mean, obviously, school shootings, mass shootings is something that no one ever wants to see.
That's
right?
horrific.
That's horrific, right? But how do we solve the gun issue without trampling on someone's right to carry firearms, right? And I think that is one of the kind of like immigration, right? I mean, you can obviously sympathize for the victims, but it's also, as an American, where do my rights to carry weapons infringe on that, right?
To me,
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does, and it's such. You missing the point. Not you, as in, but the conversation that goes around gun control. Should there be greater regulations surrounding one's ability to purchase a gun or to hold a gun or to walk around with a firearm or to bear it? Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't want to be selling guns to criminals, right? Or people that have a history that would prevent them to be able to purchase. But, they're already doing background checks, right? I think the missed point here is that you take all the guns away, it doesn't stop the crime. It doesn't stop the crime. Crime existed prior to guns. It will exist after. And you say, well, yeah, but can a crime still be created at the capacity and the magnitude of what the impact will be with a gun? Well, there was the Boston bombing. What was made with crock pots. So the criminals, the wickedness that surrounds our world, the brokenness that exists here in our society, and this is all societies globally. The truth is, we're a broken world,
right?
And hurt people will hurt people, and unfortunately, there's just too much division. And what I would say is don't talk about gun violence and gun control. Sit there as two normal running individuals that are running for the president of our country and speak normally, articulate your message, coincide with each other, share where you're alike, share your differences respectively, focus on that. But I think what creates more harm is the consistent division
Yeah.
that's created that creates the hate in weak and you know, unstable people.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So, you know, we can talk about gun control, but you know,
But it's not the guns. There's a bigger issue.
for
It's a
sure,
spiritual issue,
for sure,
right? There's a wickedness,
hmm
and it's not going to be controlled, and it's not going to be answered with just removing the weapon.
right? Not at all. So that look, man,
There's a lot. There's a lot to
here.
unpack. You know.
So okay, so we have what, 3 weeks left?
Right.
Okay, next 3 weeks you got to stay with us.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna get into tax law heavy, okay, because there's some massive difference between what each party represents from a tax law standpoint, and it is important to know exactly what laws will affect you negatively and positively year over year. We haven't talked about, there's probably still some room there for the immigration conversation, the abortion conversation. And so we've got a lot of topics to hit over
Yeah.
the next several weeks.
I'm excited. Yeah. And I think it's needed. I think this type of conversation where, you know, we're just laying down. I think we're having a conversation that many people are having in their households.
Yeah.
Divided, trying to figure out where should I cast my vote, and I'm excited to just talk about it.
And I think too, if you're asking that question, if you're the individual that's asking that question, how do I even approach? That's the right question.
Yeah.
How do you approach your ticket? How do you think through what's right from your stance, your perspective? I think for me, it begins with morality, what is right, what is true, and then who aligns most with that. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. Neither one of these members that are running for president are perfect. Matter of fact, you may not even favor one person over the other. You're voting on things that are going to be most aligned, what they're going to push, their policies, their representation, their leadership, that aligns most with what you think is right and true. And so that's my thoughts. Stay with us. We'll challenge it and see what we can do.